Welcome everyone to the spoiler room. Very excited. Always exciting when I get a chance to talk to Wisconsin filmmakers, and I've got one today who his documentary, A Mom and Dad's Nipple Factory, which is an eye-catching title to begin with, is with me today. It is Justin Superstar Johnson
That's
is
right. I
with
like how
me.
you said that. You can be my hype man. You can be my Flavor Flav that comes around with me.
I can do that. I'll just travel with you and introduce you. Sure.
All right. Perfect.
So, Justin, what I always like to start off with is why don't you tell my listeners a little bit about what your film is about?
So, Mom and Dad's Nipple Factory is a feature-length documentary about my very conservative Christian parents' secret prosthetic nipple business, and it's something where really the origins of it are start with tragedy with my mom's breast cancer, mastectomy, and reconstruction. And my dad is like always been very much a tinkerer. He's kind of like the dad from Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. You can imagine that kind of vibe, but also extremely shy, intelligent guy. And so after my mom's cancer and reconstruction, they basically rebuild the breast mound, but you don't really have a nipple there. And there's options like tattoos and
Sure.
other
Yep.
prosthetics, but they don't match. And so my dad put this kind of the same like inventive problem solving mind that he used on other very small businesses or innovations to kind of keep us kids in line because I'm the oldest of five kids. He used that same problem solving spirit to develop my mom, who's like the woman of his dreams, the perfect replacement nipple, so she could look in the mirror and not think of her breast cancer. And it was something that, especially in 2000, the 2007, 2008 era, really was something that wasn't around in a quality form for other cancer survivors, men and women. And they showed their plastic surgeon. He's like, there's nothing else like this in the world. Like, you need to offer this to other women. And that began this journey that us kids didn't know really anything about for many years, and was very much kept. My parents don't like the word secret. Was very much kept under the radar.
Sure. Sure.
And so this documentary is really it's a family story. It's funny, you'll laugh, you'll cry, all those kinds of things. It's also a very serious topic, of
Mhm.
course. But it's something that really was been very transformative to me, and touches on something that I think has been really sadly overlooked in the cancer journey for
Mhm.
a lot of people.
Yeah, it is. It's a subject that I didn't even, you don't really equate to, the psychology, and you go into it a bit of that, I think most people are just like, oh, they seem to accept it and they're doing fine, but the physicality of either missing a nipple or having it not look right, even though there's some construction that you can do. So I enjoyed that exploration in that a bit, and finding more about that, not quite realizing just how much, it meant to some many folks out there to have just something, what they consider what would be considered normal, like regular, that when they look
Yeah.
in the mirror. And I found that fascinating. What surprised me with this is, and I'm very impressed on how open you were about your family and the events leading up to it, because part of the documentary, again, which was a pleasant surprise, was leading up to the events, and showing that it Midwest families aren't all just, Norman Rockwell paintings as far as everybody getting along and handing out pies with each other, and that I know that, but what was your idea with the approach of this, and how much to include, and was there debate on how much to include in the beginning for the events leading up to, when you discover that they've been making prosthetic nipples?
That was one of the hardest parts about forming the structure of the doc. The original journey of this film was, it started, as many feature docs start, it started as a short.
Hmm.
And the conceit was, and this is also how I pitched it to my parents. So in some ways, I'm not going to consider it a lie, but in some ways it was like, oh, their time commitment they thought was going to be a lot less than it ended up being.
Sure.
But the original idea was a short doc called My Dad's Nipple Factory. And
Mhm.
the whole conceit of it was my dad making me a third nipple. And it was
Oh,
just father son type
sure.
story. So that was kind of how it all started. Very much something about the humor and the weirdness of me doing the mold and sending it to my dad, and he does the
Sure.
whole process, and the awkwardness behind that. But also, I didn't know if it was a father-son story. I didn't know if it was going to be a story about a business. And I filmed a little bit in 2015. I really couldn't figure it out. And every time I tell people about the core of this story, they would say, "Oh my God, like you have to finish that. You have to figure it out." Just
Mhm.
because even with that original title, it was still, like you said, very eye-catching. Thank you. And it wasn't until I really understood that the core of this film is my parents' love story, and that it
Mhm.
really is this family story, and not a story about a business or specifically an entrepreneur. That started opening things up for me conceptually in a pretty
Mhm.
big way. And when I was able to meet the first customer and film with them in person, that also helped me realize, oh wow, the impact here has been really great, because they were really effusive and very emotional about it. I could see how much of a difference it had made. And then as we dug into the family element of it, it was something where my producer, he's a Academy Award nominated producer, Jason Cohen, who came onto the project a couple years ago. Really, it was like I talked a lot about my siblings,
Mhm.
and I was sort of behind the camera, but it felt like my part of it just like wasn't included, and wasn't really a part of it. And that was the thing that I think a lot of filmmakers, there are certainly plenty of cringy examples, and I'm sure people could consider my example cringy, right? The filmmaker putting themselves in there. But in this instance, because it really is my family, and
Mhm.
because my exploration of it is a part of the journey. And like you said earlier, we do talk about how families can become very divided based on ideology, religion, politics, whatever. And all of the above are relevant to my family and I. And so as I went on this journey of really exploring my parents' life and getting to understand them, and as the note of just like, hey, we need to kind of understand everyone in the family started coming up, and I started looking into my past and my relationship with my parents back in that era,
Mhm.
when my mom was getting cancer, there was moments of real discovery for me, understanding how I was quite, in a lot of ways, quite rude to them, and really didn't want anything to do with them, and
Sure.
was
Sure.
becoming estranged, really more on my side of it
Mhm.
than theirs, but certainly
Sure.
pulling away from the family unit. And as I began exploring that, and as I began seeing myself change through the process, that's when it felt like it was a leg of the stool
Mm.
that we're of trying to build a complete film.
Sure.
And that evolved quite a bit. And really, it wasn't until I locked the edit. I know it's, final cut, right? So
Mhm.
it should be about editing. I locked the edit in March of 2022,
Mm.
and really, all the story arcs and all the storylines didn't really start coming into place until October of 21, when I had a very small screening with a
Mhm.
few friends in here in Minneapolis. And it was that note of like, hey, if you're going to be, and I'm the narrator, right? I'm doing the voiceover. And the note was like, if you're going to be in it, like you have to be all in it or not in it at all.
Right.
And then that's when I really started my own exploration. But the core of it is my parents' love story. But I think at the end of the day, if you're going to pick one phrase to describe what the film about, it's about becoming whole again. And
Mhm.
that works across a lot of the different themes of the doc.
Yeah, there are a lot of different themes and a few that I related to with my own personal family. Um you know, the separation, the rift that can build between parent and child for beliefs. For me personally, it was a conflict between how we were handling my children and what my mom thought at the time, uh how she thought we should be, and then so when I was watching your documentary, watching this and saw that about, the beliefs, and you hit that one point about how you were, going out for your career, and you're just like, okay, I'm old enough. Bye.
Yeah.
I kind of, I felt that can, that separation that you end up getting. And it was nice how you brought it all back together. It was nice because it's reality here, folks. This isn't just scripted. This isn't like, some reality show where you've got this scripted. This is all authentic, real, experience. This what you're happening is happening. And that's what always makes documentaries that extra level of special, I think, and especially the heart that you put in here. But putting your part in there, I do think that helped with the connection, because otherwise you're just kind of the outsider looking in. You don't have that real like emotional today, and you could that comes through on your camera work and just the way.
Thank you. Yeah, it's something that a lot of our so we've had a couple screenings, film
Mhm.
festivals and things like that, and a lot of the audience is older women, really primarily, that really resonate with this, because so I think it's one of every eight, I think at the very
Mhm.
least, women go through breast cancer, and so people have their own experiences, and they know, of course, know
Right.
people who have experiences, and so those those audience members really connect with the film, and they
Mhm.
love talking to my mom, as a fellow breast cancer survivor. But I certainly have had plenty of conversations with other people who are younger,
Mhm.
and just being like, hey, I went through a very similar thing of whether being estranged or currently being estranged, or difficulties discussing religion and politics, and the divisiveness that can be and bring. And I think that has been nice, because this doc does have a lot of different themes, and I
Mhm.
haven't found myself after screenings talking about the same thing over and over again, because so
Sure.
many different things resonate with audience members,
Mhm.
and there's so much to dig into there in terms of the content, and even like it's not included in the film just because I felt it was kind of maybe too much. But my dad did have a brother that ended
Mhm.
up dying, passing away, and him and my grandfather were estranged for
Mhm.
um,
Mhm.
for a while. He had moved to San Diego and really didn't talk with my grandpa, and then had died. And I know that my dad, who's an extremely loving and sensitive person, wouldn't want that to
Mhm.
history to repeat itself in some ways, on that. So from it's certainly the way he can be portrayed, when you just look at him from the surface, and the doc
Mhm.
can be maybe a little more colder, but that isn't he's a hard guy to really convey on camera.
Sure.
I think what's really special is
Mhm.
it's so rare in this day and age to have anyone who doesn't want to be on camera. Most
Mhm.
people want to be influencers and this and
Sure.
that, and he really like doesn't want to be on camera. But for him, if he's going to do something, he's going to do it right, and he's going to
Sure.
put his energy into it. And so it was a real honor to receive that. But yeah, so that was something where people come up to me afterwards
Mhm.
and really talk about that similar feeling. And I hope it can be a film that can help build some bridges,
Mhm.
or even just get people to start broaching conversation with their parents, or vice
Mhm.
versa. And it's something where the editing process was, in a lot of ways, when I was living in LA editing this film, and my dad was really the first kind of documentarian I ever knew. We had 150 hours of old home
Sure.
video footage that he had shot, going back to, and the clip is in the film, going back to 1986, where I'm 40 years old, and I'm seeing a home video camera for the first time, and I'm asking my dad,
Mhm.
well, how do you see from that into there? He's looking through the viewfinder on this, I'm sure, huge VHS camera.
Sure.
And so I have this incredible archive of these just beautiful, almost like verite moments
Mhm.
of us growing up. And I'm, like I said, I'm the oldest of five kids, and so I'm on this timeline of all these hours of footage, and I'm scrubbing, and I'm here, and my mom is 40, and my dad is 35. He's
Yeah.
my age at the time, and then I'm scrubbing for it, and then my mom is 65, and then she's 45, and I got this thing where it just really was like, I call it temporal whiplash,
Sure.
where
Mhm.
it was just this, you could just feel the swiftness of time,
Mhm.
and understanding, going through a lot of similar feelings. I'm not the only one, certainly in 2020, that reevaluated their priorities.
Yeah.
Um, and really being like, oh, wow, like having spent that extra time going out and filming with my parents, really getting to understand them. And then realizing going through all this footage, just how quickly life goes by, and thinking, hey, LA has its stuff, and it's good to be there for career reasons and things like that. And really, for documentary, you don't need to be there for documentary because
Sure,
the
sure.
collaboration is very minimal, honestly.
Hmm.
Like, it's not like I need to know a zillion actors or producers. Like,
Hmm.
documentaries can be done with a very small team, and so you don't really need the networking quite as
Sure.
much.
Hmm.
And that was a big part of the decision. It was moving to be close to my parents, to more easily finish the film during the
Hmm.
pandemic, but then also really just to be closer. And now I'm here in Minneapolis. My parents live in Eau Claire. It's an hour and very very
Yeah.
easy, especially compared to LA. Hour and a half
Hmm.
drive. I have lunch with my dad, and I drive back, and it is like effortless. And I really I'm glad I can have that experience now.
Yeah, that is great that the by doing the documentary, it kind of brought those things into focus, and you were able to actually, and that's what I think that's what's part of the appeal of this documentary is the natural. You could tell while you were working on this, suddenly you have this connection, and you just naturally have this reconnection and this this kind of rediscovery of what is important and where you need to be. And I think that really comes across, and that's part of the thing that touched me while watching it was especially near the end when you get to the whole, hey, we're going back to Minneapolis. I'm like, there's something in the air here. Okay.
Yeah. It's my mom's favorite part too. Yeah.
That was very, very touching. My son actually is going to Stout. So he's like halfway in between
Oh,
just
there you
about where
go.
you guys.
That's where I
So
went and got kicked out for bad grades. So I'm sure he'll do better than me.
well, I didn't mean to bring up bad memories there, but you got a lot of good
Yeah, it's fine.
memories. A lot of good memories here in the documentary. I was an only kid, so I wasn't quite aware of sibling rivalries. I only witnessed them through my good friend and through my two boys who I have. Uh, what were your siblings? How did they feel about you doing this documentary? And I'm sure, I mean, they're used to kind of having a camera in front of their face, it sounds like. But when you came to them and said, "Hey, I want to film you guys,"
Well, what a great question. So being the oldest of five, I feel in a lot of ways. And now I am the owner and CEO of a company, and we have about 30 employees. And I feel like growing up as the oldest of a very large brood of siblings, you kind of are like, they're your first employees, or they're your first
Sure.
PAs or
Mhm.
whatever. And so there was a lot of creative collaboration that we would have as kids, creatively making little films and things like that. And then, of course, with my dad, documentarian side, that was always kind of a part of it. So I think that's a thing that people would find really special about the film is I always love documentaries and series where you feel like you want to spend time with the characters. I can only handle so many episodes of like Always Sunny in Philadelphia because like they're so freaking bad, right? Like I can
Sure.
watch one or
Yeah.
two.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's too much. And I'm very lucky to have very well spoken, very wonderfully photogenic siblings.
Mm.
And so for them, it wasn't really a surprise. They know me. This is my second feature doc, and I really have lived in this world quite a while. So most of my siblings, and I have actually have this on camera. I called all my siblings and did just like exploratory, like, hey, what do you remember about this and that, before I even really started this process in earnest. And all my siblings, I was like, do you think I should make a documentary about this? And all of them said, sure, yeah, why not? Except for my brother Luke, who features in the film very prominently because he's very much a chip off the block with
Mhm.
my dad. Very quiet, very sensitive, very religious. And I asked Luke, and he was like, I don't think you should. And he was being he's a very honest guy. And I
Sure,
was like,
sure.
all right, well, I hear that. I'm still going to do it. And
You've been outvoted.
he was, and he also has a somewhat prominent storyline in the
Mm-hmm.
film, and it's something where I'm very, I won't spoil it for the audiences, but it's something where I'm very thankful that he was able to be a part of it because he also has a journey that I hope people will relate to. And so overall, siblings were very open to it. My little brother Jesse was my PA for most of this of the
Nice.
film. So
Sure.
he's off camera, like holding a bone pole, or he's like in the
Mm.
dentist chair. The dentist needed someone like to pretend they were working on, and so it really was a family
Mhm.
film in a many different senses
Sure.
from the very beginning. But I had, even with my brother, he didn't say, "Oh, you can't come film with me" or whatever. They're very gracious in allowing me to be able to ask them questions that are can be kind of tough for Midwesterners
Mhm.
to answer.
Yes, us Midwesterners, I know that feeling. I'll have a drink with you, but that question, yeah, no, we're off limits. Did you have any of those moments to where they're just like, no, we're not going to talk about that? Uh,
Um, Not too much. I mean, my
yeah,
dad, my siblings were pretty open about stuff. My
yeah,
brother, I definitely asked about some of his medical
sure,
history
yeah, yeah.
quite a few times, and I think he was pretty gracious about answering over the years, answering
Hmm.
in similar ways, even though I was asking the same. And my dad, who's got a really great memory, I'd ask him something, he kind of give me this looking back. I think you've already asked that. Like let's like move on. Um, but honestly, from the very beginning, my dad talking at all in this film, the original conceit for my dad's nipple factory was that
Sure,
mom would do all the talking because mom is very outgoing
sure.
uh, and very verbal about things.
Mhm.
My dad is very quiet, and so dad would just be in B-roll, and mom would be the one telling us about all the kind of stuff. And it
Mhm.
wasn't until we sat down and there's a core interview in the film that's my parents sitting on a couch, a little bit of American Gothic kind of vibes,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that was a nearly 2 hour interview, and it was something where I was like, I thought maybe it's just gonna be mom, and then I was like, does dad want to sit down maybe? And then he sat down, and then I'm like, oh, dad wants to talk, and that was another one of those core moments where after having this conversation and getting into these deep emotional topics, and really my
Mhm.
dad being able to articulate really well because he has struggled with stuttering in the past, and
Sure.
certainly public speaking and things like that are pretty nerve wracking for him. But him really pushing through a lot of tough topics
Mm.
and again answering my questions without really pushing back on things were all positive signs into this being
Mhm.
having the potential to be a larger project.
And I was very happy about the positivity of the whole documentary because we get so many documentaries. I'm just waiting for the end going, uh-oh, okay, where's this? Who's,
Yeah,
suddenly the
who's gonna
business
die?
goes, goes up, belly up, and this, and but
Tits up,
tits up,
that's what they would
exactly.
say.
It definitely goes tits up, but it doesn't. And I really love, getting to show the people they've impacted positively with this work. I loved seeing that. How has this, if at all, really changed things for them since you've been doing this and since it's been growing naturally? It sounds like even before the documentary, but since you've been doing that, has it changed things for them?
It's an interesting thing because I really, that was another fine line to tread, is I never
Mhm.
wanted it to come across as a promotional video for my
Right.
parents.
Yeah, no.
You certainly
Mhm,
see it's a very DIY
mhm.
operation. It's not built for scale. And my dad,
Yeah,
frankly, whereas for me, it's very natural when I was growing my company, adding employees, leading
sure.
people, that wasn't an issue for me. But for my dad, that would be like his worst nightmare. And I remember talking to a producer for a network that will go unnamed, and
Mm,
he was we were earlier in the process, we hadn't finished the film yet, and he was saying, oh, you can have this third act where your dad goes to China with a suitcase full of nipples and he's pitching all these companies to try to like, oh. I was like, okay, cool. Like my dad would hate that and he would disown me. Like there's no way. So I needed to be very honoring to him and also be
mm.
authentic as a film.
Sure.
Um, so for them, I think it is a very niche market.
Yeah.
Certainly, plenty of people have gone through, men and women have gone through breast cancer,
Mhm.
but it's at a very specific time of need. A lot of people have
Right.
tattoos, and it's within this kind of window in the cancer journey that can be small. But we had our world premiere in Milwaukee. We were the opening
Hmm.
film for the Milwaukee Film Festival, and we played the sold out 1,000 seat theater in
Nice.
downtown Milwaukee, and it was absolutely unbelievable. And I think maybe after that, my parents got three more orders. You know, it's a thing
Sure,
where
sure.
as we're on the festival circuit, the film is limited in terms of the scope it can go out to. So
Right,
it's in the hundreds, not the thousands, not
right.
the millions. But there has been, I think, a baseline
Hmm.
trickle in terms of orders, but it hasn't been a deluge. And
Hmm.
honestly, if this was something that, and we still don't have distribution, we're trying to figure all
Sure.
that stuff out. But if it went viral or was featured in a
Mhm.
big way or really was pushed, and yeah, I think there's potential there for people to say, you know, it's. But thankfully now versus 12 years ago when my mom originally had the breast cancer and they started their business in around 2011. There are a lot more options for
Sure.
women. So my
Hmm.
parents aren't the only ones doing this, and technology
Right.
is becoming better
Hmm.
with 3D printed cells and a lot more techniques that will be more permanent solutions than these, which are adhesive prosthetics
Hmm.
that are semi custom made based on several different parameters. And I think if it became something that was a burden for my dad, really,
Hmm.
and the order volume, like you hear stories of some famous food show and they go to this little hole in the wall pizza shop or Anthony Bourdain or whatever, right? And like, this is the secret hidden pizza that no one
Yeah.
knows of in Brooklyn. And then like it becomes this thing and there are lines and
Hmm.
it just becomes like, yeah, there was a local place here in Minneapolis that's I think it's Native American food,
Hmm.
and there was a New York Times write up. This is the best new restaurant in the country, and I was like, well, I'm never going to be able to eat there now because it's going to be a 4 month wait list. Like
Yeah.
I could have gone a year ago, and I would have
Yeah.
been able to get in a couple weeks. Um, and I know that if it got to that point, like my dad has said, he wants to put the website behind password, so only
Sure.
repeat customers who had already
Hmm.
ordered with them could get access. Because, and I'm sure they would link to, hey, you know, go to these other vendors,
Hmm.
like they do similar things to us. So that has never been the goal. And honestly, I think the broader like success for the film down the line, there are these things called impact screenings, which are
Hmm.
essentially if you have like for example with this film like a cancer group who wanted to do like a paid screening and put the film up and fly me and mom out and we could
Sure.
talk and things like that. I think that as my parents' business would wind down,
Hmm.
there could be opportunity for my mom and I to be able to and really, you know, really it'd be for my parents who are very frugal, it could be a great way for my mom to continue having some income in her retirement age.
Sure.
But I think that's a way where this story of the business can grow and help support them. But really, at the end of the day, like it's not really about like blowing up the business.
Right. And I never got the feeling like that. This was definitely just, I liked how it was revealed too, how it was a surprise to everyone as well. I found that interesting, but this is more about a portrait of family. And I think if people realize that, definitely, yeah, but it never, I thought you definitely did well and never treating us like, hey, now you can get these too for my film.
Yeah, here's
Here's
the
the
website.
website. Yeah. Just a couple more questions. What made you want to get into filming? Was it your dad always shooting from a camera, or, what made you want to get into the business?
I think that's a big part of it. We were always really encouraged creatively as kids, and one of my favorite memories is I was in third grade, I think, and I would draw these epic like stick figure battle scenes. I was really into stick figures and these intricate battle scenes with tanks and this and that. And I had this is very in line with me. I had this test or something I had done for
Hmm.
in third grade. I think I got a pretty bad grade. And on the back of it, I had drawn, but I had extra time because I didn't know,
Hmm.
you know, what the hell the answer. And so I drew this like epic, like stick figure battle, and there were tanks and there was parachutes and this and that. And the teacher wrote a note, you know, like C minus, and she said Justin should spend less time drawing and more time studying. And my parents thought that was so funny that they put it up on the fridge because look at this creativity this kid is
Yeah,
showing. Like, what is this teacher telling him? Like, oh, you need to get more multiple choice answers right. Like, it's stupid.
right,
So I was always encouraged creatively. And so for me, I've been making video ever since I
sure.
was
Hmm.
6 years old. And my dad was, he had like a wedding videography business and some other little things. And so the technology was around. But as a kid, certainly I feel very lucky growing up when I did in the 80s and 90s. This
Hmm.
transition from analog to digital, the tools
Right, yeah,
changing, the accessibility levels changing, was a really interesting time to grow up. And I followed in very similar footsteps to my dad. I had a wedding videography business when I was like 17, and because I was one of the internet's first video bloggers. I was like putting my
sure.
life online in like 1999, 2000, because I wanted to. My options were, and growing up as a kid in Eau Claire, I could make something for public access, rest
Right.
in peace,
Yes.
and or I could figure out what this internet thing was and put
Hmm.
videos up there. And I did a public access show. I have somewhere I have an award for most promising new producer from like 2001 or something like
Nice.
that.
Sure.
And I have it. I have an Emmy over there as well. So I always put it like next to my. I put it next to my Emmy, which came 20 years later. It's pretty funny. Um, but I always was encouraged creatively,
Hmm.
and video was just a natural format for me. And from the beginning, creating little cringy short films or really documenting my life, which ended up being the ones that I cherish a lot more, became this kind of creative currency and allowed me to network and meet a lot of interesting people. And I was a part of very early internet video startups. And then eventually I worked at Google for a short while. And I think it was the right blend of that entrepreneurial spirit that my dad
Hmm.
has, along with the craft of video. And at a certain point, when you've put enough years into something, you're like, well, okay, this is me. This is what I do.
this
Not
is
enough
what I
time to
do
get
now.
good at
Yeah,
something else. And it really was very natural. And I
sure.
think the business side of it and the creative side of it were very natural
Mm.
for me.
Well, it does come off, and now you've done two documentary features. You've mentioned stick figures and tanks and such. You got any fictional exploration you want to do with your
No,
projects, or do you like
I hate
documentary?
no, I hate narrative. Not watching it, but like
Sure.
I hate reading scripts. I
Hmm.
don't like working with actors. I think being on a traditional film set is like feels like school to me. Like I
Sure.
really hate it. I really did not like the structure of school. And documentary is you can create structure and you can have a initial
Mhm.
framework when you go in, and that's fine, especially when working with clients. But I like the element of surprise
Mhm.
and the authenticity of a documentary. And
Sure.
for me as a creative, I feel much more comfortable being a sponge than a hammer. David Fincher is a hammer. I
Sure.
want it like this, and this is my vision, right?
Sure.
And I like more being like, hey, put me in the place, let me absorb
Mhm.
the environment and be receptive, and then secrete something
Sure.
afterwards after I've been
see
able to digest it.
see where it takes you. Exactly. Right.
And that to me is a lot more that's a lot more true to
Mhm.
life. It's true to who I am. And I certainly would be fascinated to see someone else do a narrative version of this documentary. I think that would
Sure.
be pretty fascinating and something that my producers have been excited about the possibility for.
Mhm.
But yeah, for me, no, I think creatively, if I'm going to make more stuff, it's going to be on my YouTube channel, Justin
Nice.
Superstar, and I think that will be a good enough creative release for me. I don't have any plans for any more features or
Mhm.
anything like that. It's just I never wanted to do a second feature doc. This was
Sure.
just the one I had to do. It's not something I'm looking for.
Well, we're very glad you did because you gave us something special. And I guess my final question is, you're into documentaries. You really like them. What you have a favorite documentary?
Oh yeah, for me, the most formative documentary really came at the perfect time for me in my life is in this late high school, early college. It's this documentary called American Movie, which
Mm,
is absolute classic, done by this director, Chris Smith, who now has done a zillion things. He's just a real
Right.
staple of the documentary field. And it's about this very it yourself filmmaker
Mm-hmm.
in the Milwaukee area who is creating these films. And I saw it as like a high schooler, and I was just so amazed. I was like, oh my god, other people are doing films in Wisconsin,
Yeah.
and the characters are great. I rewatch it every couple of years. The characters are so great, and it's this perfect little portrait of Wisconsin in the '90s. They're like watching Brett Favre play in the Super Bowl and things like that. So that one was really super compelling to me. And then over the years, of course, discovered other films. But that film and like the narrative film Rushmore to
Oh
me are
yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
my like core memories, and I think are very true to who I am as a person, creative filmmaker, all that stuff.
Well, that's fantastic. And I thank you for your time, Justin Superstar. You mentioned the YouTube. Go ahead and chill away, sir. Where can they find your stuff at?
Yeah, my creative work you can find at Justin Superstar most everywhere. YouTube's
Mhm.
probably the best spot for that. And for the film, it's a Nip Factory Film on most of the socials. For
Okay.
our Instagram is where I'm putting up a lot
Mhm.
of our festival journey and other little behind the scenes bits and pieces. And yeah, that's where we're at.
And what festival next is it showing at? Do you have one coming up?
Nothing that's been announced.
Okay. Mhm. Sure.
But there's going to be some stuff in late July, early
Mm.
August
Okay.
in the Northeast, and
Sure.
then there's going to be something in September in the Northwest, and then I think really the thing is there's a ton of festivals, really phenomenal regional festivals in October, which of course is also Breast Cancer Awareness Month. So
Sure.
we have a lot of hopes to do quite a bit of playing around the country in the September October timeframe, just because of the volume of festivals and also the topic of the film. It's
Sure.
it's pretty tough to find a like lighthearted cancer film,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah,
there
it
are
is.
some I know there's
It is.
Jesus was Seth Rogen or something did one,
Yeah.
but I think we have a really unique film
Hmm.
that's funny, that touches people emotionally, has an audience, and we're just hoping that we are able to find the distribution and the backing to get it to a broad audience.
Well, I hope so too, because it should be seen by a lot of people. We don't get a huge amount of positive, like you mentioned, cancer films. Films about cancer usually aren't as positive as this one, and especially with the ending in that, I was very happy. People be very happy the way this plays out. So there you go, folks. Mom and Dad's Nipple Factory. I'll put the links in the body for the webpage for this podcast and the description, so you can follow where it's going to show, catch it where you can, and hopefully, yeah, I hope you get distribution for this, because it's a wonderful story that you've got here, and it definitely needs to be seen by a lot more people, I think. So thank you for stopping by. I love this shirt, by the way, too. I just want to say,
Thanks. It's Fun Shirt Friday. This is my Key West shirt, so I'm getting fun.
Fun Shirt Friday. I liked it. I got to remember that.